Namaskaram. One of the hallmarks of all Savitha Sastry's productions has been an intelligent marriage of a splendid technique and a novel storyline. Her productions, Soul Cages, Chains, Youth, Prophet, and more recently Descent, have been appreciated all over the world. One of the questions that all dancers may have is what is the necessity of actually choosing a novel storyline when we already have a rich repository of mythological stories in our own culture? We speak to AK Srikanth, writer and director of all Savitha's productions, to understand why they chose this path which is less traveled. Namaskaram, sir. Sir, what brought you to get on this path of making novel stories?
So it's a journey that started more than a decade ago. Um, in the second half of the 2000s, we lived abroad, and Savitha would come to India to perform mostly traditional pieces. And what would happen, and I would accompany her to some of these shows sometimes. And what would happen is we would attend some of her shows. I would also attend some of the shows of her other dancers, famous dancers who were in the circuit at that time. And what was very strange to me was how little the audience turnout used to be for these shows. And it put me in a mind as to if this was a such a beloved dance form which has so many enthusiasts and so many people that are following it, why are they not turning up at the shows? And as I started watching more and more of these shows, I was personally quite disheartened, A, with the lack of enthusiasm. The few people that would turn up would be busy with their cell phones. They would come in at any time, walk out at any time. If this was in a sabha where these dances were happening, it looked like they were more interested in the lunch and tiffin that was kept outside than in the dancers themselves. There were a few people who were very into the dance, but many of them tended to be from the dance school of the dancer or relatives, friends. So it seemed to me like this was a very close circuit for something that looked like a very beautiful dance form. It didn't seem to elicit any interest. And I think the second part to this is also that as somebody that doesn't understand Bharatanatyam, I found it hard to follow the stories, the mudras, the kinds of actions or theatrics that the artist does. I also found it very repetitive and boring, as I thought the content of what they were doing was mostly rooted around three or four or maybe five ideas, and everything seemed to revolve around these. It could be a Radha Krishna romance, it could be a Shiva Tandavam sort of thing, it could be something out of a religious or a mythological lore, right? At best, it got to something like, okay, Sita's travails or Gautam Buddha's wife's travails or something like that. But it usually stepped to the confines of a certain type of things that you would expect to find in a Bharatanatyam program. And I think both these effects, the fact that I was not seeing audience members and the fact that I was also seeing the same stories being done over and over again, led me to an idea that perhaps if we changed the content and delivered it through Bharatanatyam, that might work, which is what led to our first production, Soul Cages. And I think from there, our path has been clearly defined.
Sir, where do you get these ideas from? Where do you get these stories?
I think whatever I have written so far is not a story. It really happened. So I look into my own life. I look into the lives of people around me. And what I present as stories would be something that comes from these lives, or it would be something that comes from something I have come across which has affected me very deeply. The core of it would always be some truth that has occurred in the world. I might dress it up in a way where you would not be able to recognize who I'm talking about, but the core of what I'm saying would always be something that came about from my own life, or from the life of my near and dear ones, right? So how do I come across these stories? I go through my life with a lens. I look at the ideas, the events that have shaped me into being who I am, for myself and for the others. These are the thoughts that become my stories.
Sir, can you give us a brief overview on how you create and conceptualize a production?
So our productions start with the story. Now, not everything I write can be made into a production. So I discuss the story with Savitha and we go over it. We see if it's possible to make this a dance production. So that's step one. Now, assuming we're both okay and we both decide that this can be made into a production, we go into a process of storyboarding it. What that is similar to a screenplay for cinema. We break down the story into various parts and we decide what part of it is going to move through dance and what part of it is going to move through abhinaya or through storytelling itself. So we divide it into those parts, right? Now we create the music for those. That by itself is a full length project because I would then go to the music director with what we call various inspirations for the music. Now, depending on the mood that I seek for that particular dance or sequence, I would give samples of the kinds of music with relation to just look at the mood it's presenting, not so much the music itself. The music I could present could be from trance, rock, Carnatic, Hindustani, it could be anything. The idea is to take the mood of that and develop it into something in Carnatic which can be danced to. Once the music is prepared, then Savitha goes through it with her choreography. The last part of it is actually putting together how the lights are going to look like, what the costumes are going to look like. By the time we begin this process to the point where we're ready to present this, either as a film or on stage, it usually takes anywhere between 9 to 12 months.
Sir, has your belief been validated by the audience?
I think it has. I think I have been a part of all the shows, more or less all the shows that Savitha has performed, which means I've seen these productions across cities multiple times as they were performed over the last decade. As far as possible, we used to have these on weekends so that I could also be a part of the audience, right? And at the end of our shows, we used to do two things. One was we used to have a Q&A with the audience on the show itself. And two, we used to actually have something called a feedback form, where it was originally started with the purpose of getting their names, addresses, and phone numbers so that we could communicate with them for their future shows they could attend. But what we also did in that was ask them for comments on the shows. And I've actually have several books which I've compiled, bound together on public views on various shows classified by cities. And whenever I feel low about anything in life, I go back and read those. Because what I hear from them is and has been the inspiration for doing more. So I think the validation has been far beyond what I ever thought it would be.
Sir, can I ask you a question if you don't get offended?
Sure.
So you're not a dancer. Why should a dancer take you seriously?
I think I would rephrase the question. Why would someone from the audience take you seriously even if you are a dancer? Right? I will take you seriously as a dancer if I understand the art that you're presenting to me. The dancers in this world are probably a handful. The audience member that you seek is a majority of the world. And I think just as much as you would want us to understand you dancers, I think the dancers have to try and understand where we as lay audiences come from. It's a give and take. It's a symbiotic relationship. One cannot live without the other. Audiences need arts to enrich their lives. Dancers need an audience to validate what they do. Right? So my opinion on what you do would be as important, if not more important, than what you present to me. Right? So why would you take me seriously? Because at least one very famous dancer's career took a new path thanks to some suggestions I made. We all know who she is. And I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating of it. We've done it not once, not twice, probably 9 times already. So there must be something to what I say. It can't be all bullshit, I guess. I hope.
Thank you, sir, for your time to come on Inner Circle and giving us your perspective.
My pleasure.
We all will be surely waiting for all your upcoming productions.
Thank you.
And for all the Inner Circle members, all the Savitha Sastry production company new production news will come first on Inner Circle before it releases anywhere else. Stay tuned.